Hello Tech Pros, episode 228. Welcome to the podcast where every day of the week we publish another conversation exploring the anxieties, challenges, and opportunities that technical professionals and entrepreneurs face when building their career, building their products, and building their business. There are a lot of shows that focus on the nuts and bolts of technology, but this podcast is not one of them. This is about the people behind the tech industry and the mindsets and skill sets they developed that led to their success. You can learn more about this podcast and our guests at hellotechpros.com, and I invite you to read my personal story of overcoming social anxiety at anxietynerd.com. All right, let's get started. Hello, Tech Pros. This is Chad Bostic, and I'm excited to be here on Tech Thursday to talk to you. First of all, I just want to take a moment and say, hey, thanks for listening. I appreciate all the listeners who dial in, especially those who subscribe. I really, really appreciate the people who subscribe and listen day after day. This is a 7-day-a-week podcast, and if you want to get motivation, productivity, leadership, technology, people in communication, entrepreneurship, being unplugged, 7 days a week, all throughout the week, every week, to help you build your career, build your business, build your products, then this is the podcast you want to listen to for that. So please, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe because there's more stuff to listen to tomorrow, more awesome content to listen to tomorrow. Second of all, I want to test out a new format. So some of the feedback that I've gotten from my audience, from some of the people who don't listen to every single episode, is that, Chad, dude, you're a content machine. I can't keep up with you. You've got like 30, 40, 45 minutes of content every single day. And unfortunately, like, my commute is not that long. I listen to you on 2x speed, and you sound like you're talking really, really fast, and that's awesome, but I still can't keep up. And so I'm really sorry, but I would like to hear more, but I just can't keep up with you. So I've been thinking about that a lot because I've actually heard that thing. I've heard that feedback over and over and over from several people. So I thought about, you know what? I could either cut down my content and only have 1 episode a week or 2 episodes a week or 5 episodes a week, or I could cut down each episode and make them shorter. Instead of 30, 40 minutes, make them like 10, 15, 20 minutes. Or I could do nothing and just leave the content the way it is, leave the podcast the way it is. So, I love agile development. I love agile methodologies, and so I want to test with this particular episode. I want to do a test and make this the shortest episode that we've recorded here on Hello Tech Pros. And I'm going to try to get it around 10 minutes. I don't know. I'm taking a look at my content here because there's a lot of stuff to cover. I don't know if I'm going to get it to 10 minutes or over or under, but here's the deal. The episode today, we're going to talk about a list of 155 different podcasts to listen to if you're a software developer, if you're a software engineer. So a while back, a couple of months ago, I thought, you know what, there's not a really good, awesome resource that I found for software developers. I would love to have one that has like just a big board of all these awesome podcasts for developers right there on them, so you could scroll through them, you could filter. And so I started building developerpodcast.com. As I do on a lot of the domains I own, I kind of start them, I start playing with them, I put some content out there, I see if they're going to take off or not, and then a lot of them, besides Hello Tech Pros, just kind of fall to the wayside. So I did a little bit of work on developer podcasts. I've got probably, 30, 40, about 30 or 40 different podcasts that are listed on developerpodcast.com. And then I got a note from my buddy, Jon Sonmez. Jon Sonmez is a podcaster and a blogger over at simpleprogrammer.com. And he sent me the ultimate list of developer podcasts. Jon is a rock star for putting all of this content together. It's an amazing list he's put together. And he sent it to me because I am actually featured on there. I recorded Jon back on episode 40 of this podcast. If you want to listen to Jon's episode, I invite you to go to hellotechpros.com/40 to listen to Jon's episode, or visit simpleprogrammer.com to find the ultimate list of developer podcasts. And so just for fun, just for giggles, just for kicks, I thought it would be awesome to read the list that Jon put together on his site, to read off the list of all the amazing podcasts that developers can subscribe to, can listen to, and get just so much value, so much information on a lot of different areas. So if you kind of tend to stick to this show, thank you. If you kind of stick to your 1 or 2 or 3 shows that you listen to, awesome. But there's a lot of good shows that maybe you haven't heard of before. And so I thought I'd spend just a couple of minutes or several minutes, depending on how long this takes, of reading through the list of the 155 developer podcasts that Jon Sonmez put together on his ultimate list. I'm going to give him all the credit. He put all the work together. He put all this list together. But I'm going to read them off one by one. And so maybe there's a few gems in there that you haven't heard of yet that you can go check out, listen, maybe subscribe, maybe pick a new favorite out. So from the top, here we go. In the category of general interest, the Simple Programmer Podcast, Get Up and Code, Almost Better Than Silence, Away from the Keyboard, Code Newbie, Coder Radio, Developer on Fire, Developer Tea, Floss Weekly, Hello World Podcast, No Dogma Podcast, Software Engineering Radio, Eat Sleep Code Podcast, Scale Your Code, Complete Developer Podcast, Software Engineering Daily, Merge Conflict, The 5-Minute Geek Show, Full Stack Radio, The Bike Shed, The New Stack Makers, The New Stack Analysts, Software Defined Talk, The Changelog, The Dane and the Pain, Course Report, The Cynical Developer, Hello Tech Pros, hey, that's me, Learn to Code with Me, The Versioning Show. In the category of .NET and Microsoft related, .NET Rocks, Coding Blocks, .NET, Hansel Minutes, Hurting Code, MS Dev Show, Yet Another Podcast, Channel 9. In the area of mobile development podcast, Accidental Tech Podcast, Android Developers Backstage, App Masters, Core Intuition, Under the Radar, Gone Mobile, iFreaks, React Native Radio, Xamarin Podcast, Fragmented, Release Notes, Yes, Build Phase, the RayWenderlich.com Podcast, iOS Dev Break. In the category of JavaScript and Web, Adventures in Angular, The Back to Front Show, The Big Web Show, Boa World Show, Control Click Cast, JavaScript Jabber, Node Up, Shop Talk, The Web Ahead, 5JS, Start Here FM, JavaScript Air, the Web Platform Podcast, Relative Paths, Design versus Dev, Angular Air, a responsive web design podcast, Front End Happy Hour, Modern Web. In the category of game development, The Debug Log, Game Dev Unchained, Indie Dev Podcast, Gamketo.community. Man, I butchered that one. Gamketo Community. In the category of freelancing, Freelance Transformation, The Freelancer Show, and Double Your Freelancing. In the category of entrepreneurial, Entreprogrammers, the podcast for developers. Oh, John, I'm so sorry. I just butchered your podcast there, dude. Entreprogrammers, the podcast for developerpreneurs. Man, I struggle with that one. Sorry, guys. Bootstrapped with the kids. Teaching Tech Podcast. TechZing Tech Podcast. Man, I butchered that one too. I'm struggling. TechZing Tech Podcast. Bootstrapped Web. Stacking the Bricks. Real Entrepreneur Confessions. Chasing Product. Product People. Rocket Ship FM. Build and Launch. Giant Robots Smashing into Giant Robots. Giant Robots Smashing into Other Giant Robots. Startups for the Rest of Us. Entrepreneur on Fire. And in the category of Python, I kind of sound like I'm reading like the Emmy Awards or the Oscars, and the winner goes to. Okay, so in the category of Python, Talk Python to Me, Podcast in It, Test and Code. In the category of PHP, Dev Hell, the PHP Roundtable, 3 devs and a maybe. Lately in PHP. In the category of Ruby on Rails Podcast, Ruby Rogues, Ruby Plus Podcast. In the category of C++, CPP Cast. Man, that was a short list. We need some more C++ podcasts, don't we? Come on, guys. Kick it up. Let's have some C++ love around here. In the category of Java and JVM languages, Java Pub House Off Heap podcasts, Java Pub House, Illegal Argument, and VJug. In the category of miscellaneous languages, the Cognicast, Functional Geekery, LambdaCast, Deafin, Programming Throwdown, QED Podcast, the Scalawags, Test Talk, Laravel News, the Laracast Snippet, the Laravel Podcast, Elixir Foundation, and Mastering Embedded Systems. In the category of Data and Machine Learning, Partially Derivative, Data Skeptic, Linear Digressions, O'Reilly Data Show, Learning Machines 101, Data Stories, Talking Machines. In the category of Agile and Scrum, Agile for Humans, the Agile Coffee Podcast, This Agile Life, the Agile Revolution, and the Scrum Master Toolbox Podcasts. In the category of DevOps, DevOps Cafe, the Food Fight Show, Power Scripting Podcast, Run As Radio, Arrested Development, and the Puppet Podcasts. In the category of Cloud and Cloud Computing, the Cloudcast.net, Cloud Computing Weekly Podcast, Microsoft Cloud Show, Office 365 Developer Podcast, Microsoft Azure Cloud Cover Show, Azure Tuesdays with Corey, the Azure Podcast, Azure Friday, Code Coverage, the Button Click Admin Podcast, Good Day Sir Show, and Cloud Focus Weekly. And finally, drum roll, in the category of SQL and databases, SQL Data Partners, SQL Server Radio, Voice of the DBA's Podcast, SQL Down Under, SQL Server Pain Relief, and Dear SQL DBA. Woo! That was a big list. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much, Jon Sonmez, for putting this list together. That's an amazing list of podcasters. I haven't listened to them all. I haven't listened to nearly close to 10% of them probably. But there are definitely some jewels in there. Quick, big, huge shout outs to my friends here at scrolling to the list to make sure I don't miss a. Well, I'm not gonna shout out all the folks that I know, but big ones are the Cynical Developer Podcast. My friend there is just kicked it off, and he's doing a lot of good work there. And as well as codingblocks.net, both of those guys are doing some amazing stuff. And if you haven't listened to those, Cynical Developer and codingblocks.net, both of those podcasters or groups of podcasters have helped me out tremendously in getting my podcast launched. And, some of them are listeners and others have been guests on this show. So I really appreciate those guys. And to the big list, if I haven't listened to your show yet, hey, tell you what, why don't you come be a guest on my show? I'm talking to all of you listeners as well as all of you podcast hosts that are out there in this ultimate list of developer podcasts. I would love to meet each of you and have you on one of the future episodes of Hello Tech Pros. So here's what you do. You go to hellotechpros.com/guest. That's hellotechpros.com/guest. And there's all the information about the show if you haven't heard of it before. And there's a sign-up form. You can sign up and be a guest on motivation or productivity or leadership or technology or being unplugged or people in communication or entrepreneurship. You take your pick on which topic you'd like to discuss. And we can give shout-outs, another big, huge shout-outs to your podcast. And I would love to know what it is about your podcast that just excites you and what kind of stuff you're working on. If you're a listener to the show, hi, you are a listener to the show. If you've gotten to this point, hey, listen, you're listening to me. For those of you who are still listening right now, my gosh, I'm punch drunk. I feel it. If you're listening to this right now, if you are a fan of one of the other podcasts that I just gave a shout out to, why don't you do me a favor and send them a note and say, hey, Chad just threw you out a little mention. Ha ha ha, he butchered your title of your podcast. Or isn't it awesome? You got a little shout out on the show that you've never heard of before. Send those guys and girls a message from me because honestly, I don't have the fingertips to reach out to all of them today. Send them a shout out on my behalf and say, hey, Chad says hi. He would love to meet you, and have them go check out this episode. The short code for this episode is hellotechpros.com/228. hellotechpros.com/228. And you can get access to my developerpodcast.com as well as the ultimate list of developer podcasts that I just read off here on Jon Sonmez's simpleprogrammer.com. Thanks so much. And also give me feedback on the shortness of this. This is a short episode, so give me feedback. Do you like it? We're about 15 minutes in. You want them short, sweet, to the point, or do you want the longer, more in-depth discussions that we normally have? Let me know. Love to hear from you. Take care. The show notes page for this episode can be found at hellotechpros.com/228. Do you use Slack for team communication? Join the Hello Tech Pros Slack channel at hellotechpros.com/Slack. Is your website ugly? I mean, really ugly? Did your website fall out of the ugly source code repo and hit every branch on the way down? Is your website so ugly that Apple won't display it in Safari due to their human interface guidelines? Is your website so ugly that your CSS has no style? Is your website so ugly that even your mama won't bookmark it? I know a lot about ugly websites because, sadly, I've been building them my entire career. I've always made excuses like, it should be the functionality over the design. But what I should have been saying all along is, look, I'm colorblind, I'm style challenged, and I have no business building web front ends whatsoever. Luckily, I've worked with some amazing designers that have helped turn my MVPOS, or minimum viable piece of into websites that real humans want to use. And it's not just about complementary colors and rad logo designs. It's about connecting with your website visitors on an emotional level that engages the stickiness centers in their brain and makes them more curious to read about your products and then follow your call to actions. I invite you to check out the awesome tips that website designer Veronica Curran gave me for the Hello Tech Pros website and get your free personalized website makeover consultation video by visiting HelloUglySite.com. Hello Ugly Site is definitely ugly, but your website doesn't have to be. Go to HelloUglySite.com. That's HelloUglySite.com. Since publishing episode 141 on how social anxiety disorder and depression nearly cost me my life, I've gotten tons of feedback from people who are struggling with similar issues. Anxiety is a big deal. In my opinion, it's not discussed enough, especially in the tech industry, where a lot of us hide from our anxieties behind the computer screen instead of learning how to address them. That's why I started writing a book on the subject. If you are struggling with anxiety or know someone who is, please visit anxietynerd.com. You can sign up to read Chapter 1 for free, as well as receive regular progress details so that you can hold me accountable to get this book published. anxietynerd.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review, subscribe to this channel, and check back tomorrow. This has been Technology Thursday, but tomorrow my featured guest and I discuss people and communication. On Saturday, we talk entrepreneurship, Sunday, being unplugged, Monday, motivation, Tuesday, productivity, Wednesday, leadership, and back again on Thursday to discuss technology once again. And I'll talk to you tomorrow.